I want to thank you so much for coming to our first Food Policy and Practice Lecture Series. I want to welcome you to Hunter College here in East Harlem, and my name is Charles Pletkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Food Policy Center and a professor here at Hunter College. We hope the lecture series will be the first of many unique programming and learning opportunities for the New York City food community. And we started thinking about this course as a graduate course, as many of you were aware, and we kind of pivoted because we realized that the $1,500 to $2,000 per person might be a little onerous, and I think we pivoted in a great way and decided to create this as a free lecture series. And we're really excited about that, and it kind of made us think that we should be doing this every year and having somebody come in and give one of these lecture series. I'm honored today to introduce an impressive and distinguished guest lecturer, Michael Hurwitz, who is gracious and generous, and even when I spelled his name wrong, he gave me a pass. And he has a very diverse background, including law and social justice. He holds both a JD and an MSW, which is a unique combination. And for the past 11 years, Michael has served as a director of Greenmarket, a program of Grow NYC that operates more than 50 producer-only farmers markets throughout New York City. I'd like to welcome Michael and give him a warm round of applause. He will be your instructor for the next 6 lecture series, six classes, and you won't see me again, you'll just see Michael. So thanks so much, and welcome. And we didn't plan our dress, so we just
Hi everyone, good evening. It's nice to see familiar faces, colleagues, both internally at Grow NYC and former colleagues at Grow NYC, friends from other organizations, and lots of faces that I don't know. Charles said that I'm going to be up here lecturing, but actually we're going to start by hearing from some of you. Michael's told me not to push this off the edge of the stage. So when you signed up for this class, you were asked who should create food policy, and you were given a number of choices. And 3 of you said that medical professionals should be driving food policy. So is Melissa Buck here? No? All right. What about Mark Pren? Is Mark in the room? All right, so we're not going to hear from them why they chose medical professionals. But 4 of you said chefs. So what about Andrea Sperling? Andrea, are you here in the room? All right. What about Tanuja Singh? All right. So can you tell us why? Are you a chef? You work in the culinary world. Why should chefs be driving food policy?
We want to hear from you.
Okay. I didn't prepare for this. I am a chef currently with NYU Langone. I'm with the patient food. We are one of the few hospitals that do everything from scratch. We are with the program with a farmer's market that we do it every Friday. So we create a menu and a market table for that. We have 4 cafes. It's all chef run. So in a 20-year career, I'm not going to count the years, more chefs had less influence on food. And it was coming more from politicians. And then with New York City especially, I think they have more leverage now in this day and age. Consumers are more educated about food than they used to be. So I do think people are confused with the farmers market especially. They don't see the food that they see at farmers market in regular supermarkets. So unless you're not a farmers market person and you're just a regular supermarket in other parts of New York, you have no idea what to do with it. And a chef needs to lead you in that direction.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brave first participant. So the overwhelming majority of you said that community members and community residents should be driving food policy. So Tyler Rivera, Are you here?
I checked her in.
All right. I promise you we're not going to do this all night. All right? Eventually, I am going to kind of take the lead. Is Tyler here? No? What about Andrew Margone?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi. So I guess my asterisks would be community residents and students. So I'm a teacher, a high school teacher, and I teach a food studies class. And I think for all of the obvious cliche reasons why young people should be at the forefront of change. They're more interesting and more fun than us and can clean up our mistakes. So, you know, I live that every day and I really believe it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. "17 of you said that nutritionists should drive food policy. At first, I had your picture up here, Charles, but then I was instructed to do someone else. So, is Alina Zolotareva in the room? All right. Charles, right up front.
Thank you. Well, she's my hero, so thanks. So I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm also a community resident and work with chefs and doctors. So I think all of us should be driving food policy. We're all eating and we're all working with food. We're all in the system together.
Great. Thank you. 16 of you said policymakers. And so I'm going to take this one, right? So every day, I'm not a policymaker, by the way. I am a professional in the field. I am a community resident. But every day I interact with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, the USDA, the FDA, Department of Transportation, Sanitation. So those are our city, state, and federal agencies. Right? We work with, from the Farm Bill to on the procurement side, we're working with city, state, and federal legislators. Michael Bloomberg created the Office of Food Policy, and week 6, Barbara Turk will be in here, who was the coordinator of that office. And Governor Cuomo has issued numerous initiatives. So we have the executives and their appointees. And in week 3, we're going to look at how even Supreme Court decisions have guided food policy throughout the history of the 20th and 21st centuries. And then the last category was other. Is Sylvia Pong in the room? No? Oh, I saw someone bury their head in their hand. Sylvia. Who else?
I thought I dodged a bullet because so I picked other because I think as much as they can be big food can be the enemy, I think we also have to admit to the fact that we do heavily utilize their products in our everyday lives, and they are part of the equation. Some way or another, we do have to work with them. Unfortunately, as it stands now, more often than not, they are kind of working against us, but hopefully that is on the way to change.
Great. Well, I'm glad that that's what you said. We could make a long list of who else guide and should guide food policy. I think people recognize, or if you don't recognize, Bayer and Monsanto. Certainly big industry does drive policy and policy decisions, for better and for worse. Ben & Jerry's, again, all sides of the better and the for worse equation. They have a carbon tax for the dairies that provide them the raw milk that goes into their ice cream. So through their policy, they are pushing a more carbon-friendly growing practice amongst their providers, which is a positive thing. We're going to talk in week 4. Anyone know what that is? Whose logo that is? University of Georgia. So the University of Georgia's Food Safety Department auctions off for $20,000 apiece seats to their advisory board. So that's why ConAgra, Coca-Cola, Mars, and Nestle sit on their advisory board. Now I'm going to be shocked if anyone knows this one, but I'm very impressed. Anyone know whose logo that is? Or mascot that is? That's UC Davis. So UC Davis right now is doing research on how to feed cattle algae, which has a 30% reduction in methane emissions. So universities can be drivers of good food policy and of bad food policy. So, introducing myself, I did this a little backwards and I mixed up these slides about at least 15 dozen times. As Charles introduced me, my name is Michael Hurwitz. And 20 years ago, I knew nothing about food, about sustainable agriculture, and I discovered it in a garden in Brooklyn. And I'm not going to go into that story. But what I learned in that garden is that who produces our food, how it's produced, and how we consume it is going to really guide our food policy and guide how we evolve as a society over the next 50 years. This is an introductory to food policy course. This is a massive subject. We could take each subject contained within and have our own PhD program about each individual one. And I will tell you that I am no expert on each of these topics that we're going to talk about over the next 6 weeks. But I'm going to facilitate a conversation. There are experts in this room. Each one of you bring your own backgrounds, your own knowledge base, your own passion. And I'm going to facilitate a learning process and a conversation and a discovery. My goal is that at the end of this 6 weeks, we'll understand where decisions happen, how the system is structured, and identify points to influence how that policy is structured, and where we can disrupt and make good decisions for ourselves, or in my case, understand when we make bad decisions what the impacts will be. And I will tell you that I'm going to lay out a food system that I believe is broken, right? I believe that it poisons our earth, that it exploits the people who are involved in the system, and it's destroyed farmers and farmland, it exploits people, and it places profit at the core of its functionality. We are going to have conversations that may be uncomfortable in various ways that are going to challenge our preconceived notions. I will tell you that just in reading for today, I was reminded of how much I don't know, and what I thought I knew, again, was a little bit off. And don't be afraid to ask questions and to push yourselves and to rely on one another. I know it's a big lecture hall, but like tonight we called on people, interrupt with a hand, engage, ask good questions, and let's have some fun with this, all right? So I'm going to show a little clip to introduce how we got to where we are today.
Meanwhile, across the country in Washington, D.C., plans were being cooked up to industrialize food on a massive scale. The budding local food movement was in danger of being inadvertently stomped out by, of all things, the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
I announced the nomination of the Secretary of Agriculture on Armistice Day. He's been wondering what became of the truce. I, Earl Lauer Butts. I, Earl Lauer Butts. Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear.
Before Earl Butts, the goal of federal food policy was careful management of supply and demand. This was about to change.
We're going to make this industry pay. And the way you make it economically attractive is to regain respectability for a very simple 6-letter word. It's spelled P-R-O-F-I-T.
Earl Butz was a very mercurial character. He was a very flamboyant character. He shot straight from the hip.
I've got a name that lends itself to puns, and I'm the first one to pun on it. Some of my friends at Purdue University sent me that sign the other day.
He was a professor at Purdue and executive with Ralston Purina, and when he became secretary of the Department of Agriculture, he very much bought into this idea of farming as a way to create cheap food.
For 40 years, my philosophy has been on the side of the private sector.
He started the process of peeling back and dismantling these New Deal mechanisms and basically telling farmers to plant fence row to fence row, don't leave any land fallow, grow as much food as you possibly can, and if you're not big, get big or get out.
Earl Butz set out to apply his big business mindset to agriculture. His pitch to farmers was this: grow as much food as you can, we'll do our best to help you sell it. Anything you can't sell to Americans, we'll slough off on the Russians. Don't you worry about your pocketbook. If prices fall, we've got your back.
Instead of supporting farmers for not growing food, farmers were encouraged to grow more food, and they did so with enormous efficiency.
It sounds like a great idea. Capitalism at work. Everybody wins. Right?
The real beneficiary of the subsidy system is not farmers, because they were struggling in this industry where they are the low-cost producer. The real beneficiary were the buyers of the grain, the buyers of the corn and the wheat and the soy, that could buy the product at a very cheap price and then process it into something and sell it at a higher price. We're talking about companies like Archer Daniels Midland, we're talking about Cargill, which process the corn and soy into all these products that end up on the supermarket shelf.
Cheese? No, not real cheese. A delicious imitation of cheese. It has less than 20% of the milk fat of cheese. The rest has been replaced by golden corn oil.
What the Farm Bill does is to subsidize commodity ingredients. Commodity ingredients get turned into very highly profitable processed foods.
High fructose corn sweeteners to replace imported sugar in soft drinks and countless other foods. Nutritionally complete food blends for feeding hungry people throughout the world.
Corn gets turned into corn sweeteners, soybeans get turned into soy oil, which turn up in a lot of cheap food products. And these food products are cheaper on a per calorie basis than are fruits and vegetables, which are considered by the Department of Agriculture to be specialty crops and not worthy of the kind of attention that corn, soybeans, cotton, and wheat get. So in a sense, our current food system promotes obesity.
Pioneering new foods to meet today's and tomorrow's nutritional challenges. That is how ADM uses America's abundance to meet the world's needs.
The whole process ends up being shot through with cheap corn. It's the oil that they fried the McNugget in, it's the feed that fed the chicken, it's the breading on the McNugget. And so you know basically nutrition ends up narrowing down to this seemingly endless variety of products that are really basically iterations of cheap corn and soy.
Government subsidies go to pay for exactly the ingredients that end up in the profitable junk foods that end up adding calories to people's diets that they don't really need, when what you really want people to be eating is fruits, vegetables, whole grains, meat and dairy products, and all those foods that are on the periphery of the supermarket.
Next time you hit the supermarket, you can check it out for yourself. Around the periphery is the good stuff: produce, meats, dairy, but to get to any of it, we have to walk through rows and rows of processed junk. That isn't a coincidence.
There's a definite link between the policies that Earl Butz promoted, which meant greater farm consolidation, the integration of agriculture, and the type of food production system that we have today. It's led to a farm subsidy program going to the largest commodity producers at the expense of everyone else, and a food system that isn't healthy for us Americans.
This entire system is based on producing a whole ton of food that's making us sick. If you look at the cost of food as a percentage of income over time in the United States, in the past 30 years, you get a steadily downward graph. And that is sort of the triumph of industrial food, and that's the triumph of Earl Butz. He can point to that chart and say, look, what I did worked. But if you take the same chart and you look at the per capita expenditures on healthcare over time, over the same period, is going in the opposite direction. And so what we're doing as a society is we're spending money that we used to spend on good, quality, healthy food, and we're spending it on healthcare, on treating the consequences of this cheap food system that we've created. So Earl Butts' triumph ends up being extremely expensive, costly, damaging, hurtful of human beings.
All right. So we're going to spend the next 5 weeks sort of talking about what they just communicated. And going back constantly to thinking through those 3 questions as our guiding questions. Who produces our food, right? How it's produced, and who has access to what type of food. And the answers to each of these have far-reaching consequences. They're guided by competing interests and values and goals, and they all have implications on our personal, economic, environmental, and societal well-being, on issues of sovereignty and survival. And again, this is how I define food policy and everything that flows from it. So later tonight, when we talk about the Farm Bill, this is what the Farm Bill sets out to answer as well. So when we look at how our food is produced and who produces it, right, we're either going to have farms that are diversified, or we're going to have farms that have one single crop and fields of it. Right? We're going to grow according to organic methods, or we're going to have you use conventional methods. And I will tell you that in week 6, when I present about our work at Grow NYC, I'm going to talk about how I think that the term conventional is insufficient. Right? We're going to have conversations about the role that GMOs play, and you're going to do readings about GMOs. And what are the arguments? And I had an argument, so we don't allow GMO produce to be sold at Greenmarket. But I'll tell you that if we allowed GMO sweet corn rather than conventional sweet corn, it would be more, would create greater revenue for the farmers. They would spray less, and they would spray less deadly chemicals. But because we're opposed to GMOs for other reasons, that's the decision that we made as an organization, and we can get into that when we talk about our work. Right? There are these types of controlled environment growing systems, and there are these types of controlled environment growing systems. I don't know who read this week that now there are robots that are actually seeding and harvesting in farms that look like these. Right? There are soil-based urban farms. In fact, we have a farmer at Greenmarket who grows on 1 acre in Staten Island and sells at about 4 markets, selling specialty Mexican items to his neighbors, to his family's neighbors. And he can make about between $50,000 to $75,000 on that 1 acre growing in the city. And there are urban farms that look like this. When we talk about who drives policy and who should be driving food policy, when Christine Quinn was the Speaker of City Council, someone on her staff called me and said, what do you think, what's your take on urban agriculture? And I said, well, that's a pretty big question. Well, what do you mean? She's like, we're thinking about creating regulations around the larger rooftop farms. What do you think? And I said, well, I discovered agriculture in an urban farm. So I hold a very special place for urban agriculture. In community gardens, it's a place where we can really bring neighbors together. It's an opportunity to really grow culturally appropriate food that may not be available in local stores. It's an opportunity for individuals to supplement incomes or to supplement their own food purchasing. And we should be creating as many educational opportunities for these types of community gardens that we can. I don't know, I haven't seen a small community garden being a viable economic model if someone just wants to farm on a community garden, but it certainly can have a significant impact, again, on what they eat and maybe bring a little extra money into their pockets. When it comes to rooftop farms like this, I don't think these are inherently evil. I think that it can create jobs for individuals. I think that some of the rooftop farms are doing interesting things around studying water usage, which actually is applicable to the greater farming community. But when it comes to creating food policy and investment, you want to create zoning that allows for this, fantastic. But if you want to take city dollars and invest in these farms that cost between $850,000 and $2 million to put on a rooftop and is growing a certain type of food that is actually not going to feed our population, it's a bad idea. So get out of the way and let them zone for it and let them raise private money. But if you're going to invest in a food system, do what you're doing like in the Watershed Ag Council, where you're preserving farmland from development, you're protecting our watershed, and otherwise get out of the way. So we can, again, get our proteins through confined operations. And going back, who's creating policy? Well, next in November, Proposition 12 in California, they're going to vote on new minimum size requirements for hens, for veal, and for pigs. And also on Prop 12 is that all eggs will be cage-free by 2022. And this is not just for California farms, it's for any of those products that are coming into the state. Can anyone guess what the argument of the National Pork Producers Council or the Association of California Egg Producers is? Anyone? Well, they're saying that it's going to cost more for consumers and it's going to lead to shortages, and therefore they're spending money to challenge us. And Charles earlier tonight handed me his pamphlet about how industry is suing cities that want to create regulations around soda taxes and what else in addition to soda taxes? Other tax on sugar. That's right.
Creating anti-litigation policies.
Right.
So that you can't sue.
So that you can't sue. You're going to see this slide again in week 6, because there's other ways to raise those same eggs. There are policies that support farmers like Nestor Teller, and there are policies that support farmers like Ted Turner. There's small-scale processing. This is Stephanie Villani from Blue Moon Fish in her backyard in Manituck, smoking blowfish to bring into market, creating a value-added product, again, that will generate increased income for her small boat and fishing company. There's larger scale processing. This is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, this creates economic opportunities for farmers. It creates economic opportunities for individuals that don't want to grow food, but that can be involved in food. And as long as these are jobs that are paying living wages, this is a great thing. Unfortunately, a lot of the processing jobs are some of the lowest paying jobs. And a lot of jobs in the food industry are some of the lowest paying jobs. We're going to look at that in week 3. But processing in and of itself is potentially a very good thing. And then, of course, there's this type of processing, which is not a good thing. Anyone know? Pink slime. So then, how do we consume? And who has access to what food? Again, has consequences, right? How these issues are answered have implications on our health, on our economy, on the future of agriculture, on issues of food waste. So, and each individual type of place that we consume from, again, has their own strengths and weaknesses. I will stand up here as the director of a farmers market organization and tell you this is probably the least convenient way to shop. It's about, right? It's about driving profit to the individuals that are growing the food, so it's not always priced in the most accessible way. So there are policies that we have to create to either make these more accessible or to make it so that farmers markets can be thriving in different ways. There's the supermarket. One, not all supermarkets are created equally. Not all are distributed equitably.
So true.
Right? We saw if anyone read Omnivore's Dilemma, which I still love as a introductory book. It's phenomenal. It explains these issues so clearly in, I think, a non-judgy way, what is actually in the supermarket in terms of, I know in the clip that we saw, they said that the meats and the vegetables are all good. It's not necessarily true. And the vegetables, because the farmer has to grow for uniformity, has to grow for consistency, has to grow for shipping, and so that it can travel about 1,500 to 1,700 miles, leads to food waste, and it leads to the lack of biodiversity because they can only choose so many products that they're going to have on their shelves. Right? There are folks who buy their fruits and vegetables or their staples through neighborhood bodegas. Home delivery. Every week we get called by a new home delivery service that wants to partner in some way. I've gotten in trouble for using this slide before, but I'm allowed to, particularly in an educational setting, for a few reasons. I always say if it's farm fresh and dirt cheap, it means the farmer's not getting paid the fair share of what it takes to bring that product to market. The person who packed that truck is not making a living wage. The person that's driving that truck is not making a living wage, and I assure you that Fresh Direct is not driving to every neighborhood in the city. We also subsidize Fresh Direct as taxpayers, right? So Department of Sanitation, every individually wrapped cucumber, all those boxes that they come in that you put out on your streets, we are paying, that is free hauling that we are then paying for, right? There's fast food restaurants, there's neighborhood restaurants, more prepared meal kits. I put this one in the corner because that's what I get. It's called Superfine Tiffins. So I live in Jackson Heights, and it's a woman from my neighborhood. Shops at the market for what she can, and it's phenomenal. And then she actually delivers to Manhattan, Brooklyn also, so superfinetiffins.com. Because she's doing it right. And when you go to scale, like Blue Apron, you learn very quickly it's hard to maintain the values with which you started, right? So in terms of sourcing from farmers rather than sourcing from distributors, that starts to change when your investors start demanding profit over principle. Then we get to institutions, right? This is a comparison of school food meals from around the globe. And you can look at who values food and how by what we serve our children. The federal reimbursement rate for school lunch, this is the highest reimbursement rate. These are for schools where 60% of students receive free lunch or less, is $3.39, and that includes labor. So we go back to that, that page that I talked about, who drives food policy. So the executives, right? The executives. Governor Cuomo in New York State just created a policy that they will increase the state reimbursement rate from 5.9 cents to 25 cents for any school that purchases at least 30% from local sources.
Say that again?
Okay. For New York State, the reimbursement rate will go from 5.9 cents to 25 cents. I said percent. To 25 cents, but that is a significant percentage increase for any school that buys 30% local. And that's a driver of local economy. And then lastly, as part of this conversation, how we shop, what we use to purchase food, also has serious policy implications. Whether it's cash, whether we're using credit cards, whether we're using SNAP, which is a federally funded program, again, that we're going to hear about in the Farm Bill. This is farmers market nutrition coupons. It's $4. Comes from 2 federal programs. One for the seniors who participate receive $4. That funding is provided in the Farm Bill. But women who are participating in the WIC program, and WIC is for low-income mothers or expecting mothers, their farmers market nutrition program money is in an annual appropriation, not protected in the Farm Bill, and every year we fight to keep that funding maintained. And then lastly, this is the New York City Health Buck. This is the first ever incentive program that was created in the country from the Department of Health. Kathy, I think it was in the Bronx DPO that first released, right? The health buck. And the way we utilize the health buck is for every $5 that someone spends using SNAP at a farmer's market or at a fresh food box site, they receive a $2 health buck, which is a 40% boost in buying power.
Not a fresh food box.
Yep.
We do now.
Youth market only.
Youth market only, sorry.
Thank you, Ray.
Our youth markets. Thank you for the, no, that's wrong. So at our youth markets. So this came from city funding, and now through a Farm Bill initiative called Finney, the city receives extra funding that allowed this program to go year-round and for us to distribute greater amounts of them. So again, these three concepts of who produces our food, how it's produced, and how we access it are going to be these consistent things. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. Because it's really how policy is guided and how we're going to intervene and disrupt. And it's not, I know I laid out earlier that we're going to have to be overwhelmed, we're going to feel challenged at times. We're also going to talk about really powerful solutions that people have come up with to disrupt and to provide alternatives and to create a food system that actually values the people who are producing the food, that values the land that is bringing us the food, that sees communities and producers as partners in all of this, and one that is less extractive and one that is actually working together. So, the reading, one of the readings that we had today, Food That Travels Well, it's an old article. And I chose it because I remember that when I first started, I started this job in 2007. Here I come to this great local food program, and in August, this op-ed is released that local food may not be, the end-all. And people in my office are like, oh my God, we have to write a response, what are we going to do? Like they're challenging our basic premise. But this is part of the conversation. Like when all the things that you read for this class, that we read outside of class, think critically about what you're reading. Question what you're comfortable with. And if you're going to come up with arguments, back it up and create that evidence. Because you know what? Maybe they are. There's a lot of substance in that we are no longer simply a local society. There are global food chains and distribution systems. And what is going to be more efficient? And if it's less efficient to eat lamb that's produced in London, is the answer bringing it from New Zealand? Or is the answer eating less lamb? And only eating lamb that can be raised in London during the seasons when grass is thriving? And the answer is, I don't know. But those are the kinds of questions and conversations that we're going to have. And that when you're reading this, when you're reading for this class, and when you're reading outside this class, really dive down. When this came out, it said, in one of the quotes is, researchers from Lincoln University in New Zealand found so-and-so. Also in week 4, we're going to look at the relationship between industry and research, and land grant research, and the role that industry plays in guiding regulations. And so, was it the Sheep Breeders Association that funded that research that produced this op-ed? Maybe. But those are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking. And before this class, I really wanted to hate on James McWilliams, so I went and did some background digging up on him. And what I found actually was he has some really good stuff on his blog. So I have the link down here, and I guess we're going to make these public, but there's some really good things that he has created. So going back to our 3 questions, you're going to get sick of hearing me say this tonight, but I won't say it much more. Each week, I'm going to ask you to keep a food journal, right? And it's going to get tedious and boring, so do it as you can, right? We are all very busy people. But at each meal, as you document what you purchased, think about those 3 questions, right? So if we yesterday went to the International Meat Market in Astoria and bought a whole pasture-raised chicken, I'm going to think, this was raised on pasture in Pennsylvania. There at least was a farmer. That farmer had to buy grain. That grain was probably GMO feed, vegetarian feed that he fed that bird, so he had to buy that from the local grain feed provider. There's obviously infrastructure in going into building that barn that those chickens live in. Then that At the very least, that chicken traveled to me through some distributor. It went to my butcher. When I went to the butcher, what was available there, right? I could have bought the organic bird for $7.99 a pound. I could have bought the regular raised bird, the conventionally raised bird for 99 cents a pound. I chose this bird. There were lots of other options. There were lots of other people. I could have used cash or credit cards to do this. I went home and I cooked that night because I didn't have to pick up my kids from an after-school program, or I didn't have a work engagement, or I wasn't so tired when I got home I actually felt like cooking. These are how we make food decisions on a daily basis. And these are how we're going to think strategically about how we make good and bad food decisions, or understand if we're going to be policymakers. These are the same kinds of questions that everyone is grappling with, whether it's how much money they have in their pocket, how much time they have to go shopping, and everything in between. So I'm going to show one more clip to introduce our guest for this evening. And this is going to be about, from the same, which is Food Fight, the same film I showed before, but I have to cue it up properly.
Can we dim the lights?
Meanwhile, across the country in Washington, D.C., plans were being cooked up to industrialize food on a massive scale.
LED lights?
I'm Representative Ron Kind. I represent the 3rd Congressional District of Western Wisconsin. I ran for Congress because I hope to make a difference in people's lives. And I decided to take a leadership role with the Farm Bill because of the implications it has for all of us throughout the country.
For too long, farm policy has resulted in billions of dollars of subsidies going to a few but very large and very wealthy entities who then gobble up family farms around them, drive up land values, and make it virtually impossible for new beginning farmers to enter the business.
Today, 70% of the agriculture subsidies are going to the largest and wealthiest 10% of the producers. And yet those who are producing specialty crops, for instance, the fruit and vegetables, the things we need to be consuming more of in order to battle the obesity epidemic, childhood obesity, they get nothing in the way of subsidies at all. And yet they're the majority of agriculture production here in the United States. And you know, the Kind-Flake Amendment was really a statement about the future of food policy, where we're going to go with this Farm Bill. Clearly, if we did the Farm Bill right this year, it could be the healthy food bill of the 21st century.
What we propose in our amendment would be significant new investments in other priority areas. We have a $1.2 billion increase for specialty crops and a healthy food program to combat the obesity epidemic, which is ravaging our nation.
We also had provisions in there that encouraged local production, that allowed a transition program for farmers to get into organic production, the establishment of farmer markets and food to cafeteria programs for our schools.
This is what happens when people aren't on the Agriculture Committee and get involved in this very complex area.
I'm Congressman Colin Peterson. I'm chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. The goal of the Farm Bill is to make sure that we have the most efficient, low-cost production agriculture that we can have.
I've heard that the goal is to maintain a low-cost food system for the American consumer. But I think the typical consumer realizes that our farmers need to make a decent living too.
There's a lot of forces out there trying to get us to change what we're doing, and we are changing. But we can't just pull the rug out from under what we've been doing for the last 100 years.
The argument's always, well, wait 5 years from now. You know, this is too much too soon. And I've been here for a while. I've been through a couple of Farm Bill debates. Those 5 years never do arrive at your doorstep. But you also have some very powerful and entrenched special interests whose job it is to protect the status quo.
The farm state politicians that have taken over the major Senate and House committees, they're on the payroll of the large farming interests in their states. And so you get this situation where we have now, where there's a lot of public outcry about the Farm Bill. And people are hungry for reform, they're hungry for information about how the Farm Bill works. But at the same time, these voices are completely marginalized in Washington.
When you go up against the very powerful lobby but also agriculture committees that are the true beneficiaries of these farm subsidies, it's very difficult then to convince enough colleagues that reform can happen today rather than waiting 5 years from now.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the Kind Amendment and in opposition to any amendment trying to destroy the Farm Bill.
I just want people to know what this bill actually does, and it does not do what some people have been saying.
I rise in opposition to my good friend from Wisconsin's piece of legislation. It's well-meaning, but I believe it does not address the needs of my district.
What do we want for our future? Fast, corporate-style ag production or family farmers?
Now, the Kind Amendment may be kind to someone, but it's not to American farm families. I thank the gentleman from Minnesota. I can't say enough good things about the wonderful work he's done as chairman of this committee.
Madam Chair, the fundamental fact is that when you've got 2/3 of the subsidy program in this Farm Bill going to just 30 congressional districts who are well represented on the committee, I think it's unrealistic to expect that that committee is going to produce a policy statement that embraces reform and new ideas. I should know, I used to serve on the committee. My district takes a hit under this reform bill, but sometimes it takes a group of well-intentioned individuals to move the cause of reform forward, and that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
I took up the cause and the fight for this farm bill because I think it's important. This is about support for family farms and giving them a fair shake. But it's also a fight over the course of future agriculture. How are we going to manage the lands? What type of food products are we going to produce? It's a fight worth having because there's a lot at stake in riding on the outcome of it. But it's a fight that can't be waged alone. It can only be won through the help and the interest of the country as a whole and the American people. A lot of checks and balances built into the system, but it doesn't mean you can't come to work prepared every day and you can't fight hard for the principles and the values that you believe in. I think the future of reform in the Farm Bill has never been stronger, and as more people get more informed, I think this is going to become a more powerful political message to convince my colleagues in Congress that this is the right thing to do.
So, real quick, before you move on, hopefully you noticed that food is not a partisan issue. There were both Democrats and Republicans that were talking about what that food policy should be. Lauren, correct me if I'm not correct. Colin Peterson is still there, and he's one of the big four that's negotiating the Farm Bill, and right?
Yep.
And is the ranking member of the Ag Committee as a Democrat.
Yep.
And then lastly, before I introduce our guest, this is the breakdown of, oh, one last thing, sorry. That conversation was happening in 2000, this film was made in 2008. That's 2 farm bills ago. So remember how Kat said, we keep hearing about it, it's 5 years down the line, it's 5 years down the line. Well, now it's 2018 and the same conversations are taking place about the Farm Bill. But when I started looking at Farm Bill, I made the assumption that subsidies were the the largest expenditure in the Farm Bill. And they're not. The nutrition programs are. Subsidies come after that. Our guest tonight is Lauren Williams. She's from the New York Farm Bureau. Lauren is the Associate Director of National Affairs at New York Farm Bureau, where she's responsible for directing and coordinating New York Farm Bureau's federal lobbying efforts, developing and implementing short and long-term lobbying strategies, establishing and maintaining working relationship with New York senators and congressional delegation, as well as their staff. She also handles labor and environmental issues at both the state and federal level. Lauren also serves on the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee and the Department of Environmental Conservation Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation Work Group. Lauren grew up on her family's dairy farm in southeastern Pennsylvania, and then went on to earn a degree in Natural Resources and Animal Sciences from Cornell University in 2012. I met Lauren when she was coordinating a group of New York organizations, from NOFA to Just Food to City Harvest to Hunger Action Network to you name it, a joint letter that we could talk about our priorities in the Farm Bill. And Lauren is an expert in the Farm Bill, is going to walk us through Farm Bill and federal policy. And I will tell you from a Farm Bill perspective, there are about 8 programs that are funded through the Farm Bill that affect our work every day at Grow NYC, from SNAP to beginning farmer training, to community food projects, to farmers market promotion program, to local food distribution, to scientific research on organic grains. It's not just about nutrition, it's not just about subsidies, but those are crucial as well. So let's hear it for Lauren.
All right. Can everybody hear me? A-okay? Yeah. All right. Same with what Michael kind of laid out. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. If anything doesn't make sense or you have a question, feel free to interject with me. Want to just have a good open discussion on this. So kind of what to carry off of what Michael said, federal farm policies have an impact, both at the state and local level, and everything kind of filters down. So we want to kind of start you at the big macro level, and then we'll kind of work our way through it. So just a little bit of background about the organization that I work for. We are the largest agricultural advocacy organization in the state. We were founded in 1911, and we have a grassroots policy process where everything we lobby and advocate for is based on our membership gets together one time a year and votes on policy that we're going to work on. Our New York membership is about 20,000 farm members. Our national membership is about 6 million. So we do work at both the state and federal level. We represent all different types of commodities and all different types of production methods. And as Michael said, we'll work with trade organizations, we'll work with food policy organizations, environmental groups as well. So just to give an overview of what farming looks like in New York State, there's about 35,000 farms in New York. About 98% of those are family owned. And that may be in the form of just one single family, or there might be multiple families under an LLC operating on a larger farm. About 25% of New York State is agricultural land. That's about 7.3 million acres, and the average size of a farm in New York State is 206 acres, which is probably a little less than the national average, just because we have hills and valleys that don't allow for the big swaths of farmland that you see out in the Midwest. So about $5 billion in farm sales in 2006. One of the big economies of New York State. Dairy is our largest portion. It makes about $2.5 billion of our ag sales. So dairy is a major driver in the state. But you may hear a little bit about it. The dairy industry is going through some really hard times. So we've seen over the past 10 years, about 1,000 dairy farms go out of business. So that's also playing into what our farmscape looks like in the state. And going off of farm diversity, we're a pretty diverse state. Of course, dairy's big, so we're big in cottage cheese, yogurt, sour cream, but we're also big in apples, snap beans, and maple syrup. We're big in cabbage and grapes as well. So a lot of diversity, which makes it, how do we capture all of this and fit everybody's needs? Where, we're not just growing, corn and soybeans, we're growing, corn, soybeans, and cabbage and everything else. So that plays into our discussions with how we work at the federal level. So of course, most of you guys are familiar with what's happening on the national landscape. Republican control of the Senate, 51 to 49, which makes things, can be very marginal for getting things passed. And that plays in very keyly into the Farm Bill discussions and how we work to make sure it's bipartisan going forward. House, of course, is Republican control, but as you'll see with this Farm Bill, there were some margins where Republicans went with Dems just because based on nutrition policy. And it'll be interesting to see how the upcoming 2008 midterm elections will play into this and how that's going to impact whether or not we get a Farm Bill done this year. So some big overarching agricultural issues, of course we have the Farm Bill that's going on. Labor and immigration continue to be a big issue for agriculture as well, whether or not we can have access to enough labor for seasonal, especially during seasonal times. Sometimes we'll hear, farmers didn't get a worker in time through like a visa program, so they had to leave a crop in the field. And that also plays into, being able to, serve the food market and being able to, whether or not you're gonna get paid for a crop. Trade is another big thing. Just last week, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement details were released. We're hoping that'll be a positive for our dairy farmers as Canada was opening up some of their markets, but Mexico is also a big market for us. We ship 17% of New York State's dairy products go to Mexico. So that's just keys you in on the kind of the global of where we're sending a lot of our products. The farm economy is not doing that well. So this kind of shows where we are with grain prices have been decreasing. We've seen net farm income decrease 52% over the past 5 years. So back in 2014, when we wrote the last Farm Bill, commodity prices were a little bit lower, but we've seen huge decreases since then. And that'll also impact, what policies we're looking for in a Farm Bill. And what type, programs we may try and advocate for. And this also plays into, we've seen a lot of farm debt. With low commodity prices, farmers aren't receiving a lot of money for their product, so they're taking out more loans and leveraging money to just stay in business. So you can see farm debt is even higher than real estate debt, which I think is pretty significant when you look across the country and where that debt level is. Yes?
Why do we think grain prices have decreased? Do you know what the reason is for that? Is it because eating trends have changed?
I think some eating trends, some of the global markets have shifted. China's not taking as many crops, especially with the tariffs. We've seen decreases in them taking, corn, especially soybeans. But there's also other countries, like Brazil is adding a lot more soybeans to the global market. So there's only so much soybeans the U.S. can take, and it has to go somewhere else. So I think, it's changing eating habits, but also the global market as well. And we're really good at making food. So as we develop better crop varieties, if you can make more bushels per acre, that's going to increase your overall production and just add more to the market and have an overproduction. We've kind of seen that with the dairy industry as well. We're really good at making milk, but we don't always have a good market for that. So that's kind of where the stress of, both on the crop side and the dairy side comes from as well. So what is the Farm Bill? Some of you probably are familiar with the Farm Bill and what's in it, but it's a comprehensive legislative package. Typically, it's about 1,000 pages, so it's not light reading, but if you're ever looking for a good nighttime read, it's a great option. But what it has in it has programs for agriculture, conservation, nutrition, rural development, and research. It's passed every 5 years approximately, and that'll depend on whether or not Congress is able to work together to get that passed. And then it's implemented by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they kind of set, they take the law and then put that into practice with the different programs that exist. So kind of where we started with the Farm Bill history. We started back in 1933, and kind of what was going on at the time is we had the Great Depression, and we had the Dust Bowl. So farmers weren't getting paid a lot of money for their product, and they were also losing a lot of their crop to drought and erosion because we didn't have those good conservation practices that we do have now. So kind of what was in that first farm bill was, commodity prices, being able to support the price that a farmer received for their commodity, as well as conservation programs, like maybe we should plant a cover crop during the winter so, soil can't be washed away. Then they also did some purchasing of excess commodities and distribution to lower income individuals as well, which is kind of when the nutrition program wasn't added till 1973, but I think there's always been that history of purchasing crops and food products and then distributing them to kind of take them off the market to supplement the overall price. And of course, the Farm Bill has grown over the years. We now address rural issues. We continue to do conservation as well as research. Yes?
Why were the nutrition programs added? Is that because they were receiving food from the farm?
Part of it, and I think they were able to say, like, let's marry these two and bring them together, since, a lot of our agriculture programs feed into the nutrition programs. It would make sense for them to bring them together.
What impact would it have if they were taken out of the bill?
See, that's a very good point, and I will touch on this in future slides, but the other way of bringing it together also got really good bipartisan support, because you had your rural Republicans and your urban Democrats, not to stereotype everybody, but they were able to work together to get this done and get more funding together as a large package, because they know going forward that I know I got the support from the rural and the urban, and they're going to vote to pass this, because nobody wants to take food away from their constituents or take support programs away from their farmers.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What was the economy like before the Farm Bill? Was there equilibrium in the markets? Was there how did it work? And did it collapse because of the economy in the 1930s? And then why didn't we go back to see what worked before the collapse?
And before the 1930s, I think we saw a lot more smaller farms, a lot more people on the land. And kind of when the Great Depression happened, people left that farm way of life. So being able to support the farmers that remained to keep a steady food supply was kind of why they put that program into place. Prior to some of the Farm Bill legislation, we've had an ag committee that worked on farm programs. We also created the land grant universities, which helped fund farmers and their research. So that all played into it, and I think they were able to see, hey, this vehicle worked. Let's continue to have a bill that works together going forward. And I'll throw this up there, kind of going off what Michael said, what's in the Farm Bill. I think when we talk to people about the Farm Bill, they're like, oh, that's just subsidies for farmers, or it's just free handouts for food, free food handouts for people, and kind of correcting that misconception that that's not true. It does provide support for farmers, but it also helps, lower income individuals as well. But it's not just a free handout. It is a setup in a program, and we think, it has good benefits for everybody. And so this was the 2014 Farm Bill, and the way that, the percentages work out for the 2018 Farm Bill, we're about 76% now for nutrition, which is about $664 billion for the nutrition program over 10 years. And the other 23% is the commodities, the conservation, and the crop insurance. And then 0.5% is your research, your energy, your credit. So some of the smaller programs do a lot of good work, but they don't get a lot of good funding, which, we support programs for all our farmers, but sometimes in New York, we want to make sure that our specialty crop farmers are well taken care of as well, and make sure that there's research there for them and, market development to say, hey, let's check out beets or cabbage and the potential they have versus corn products. So the politics of the Farm Bill, to go back to your question, there's typically bipartisan support. Rural areas want farm programs, and urban areas, we typically say care about the nutrition. But I think, urban areas can also care about, farmers, and then rural areas also care about nutrition as well. So it's a good way, everybody usually compromises and we get, bipartisan support to get a Farm Bill passed. That's not so much the case this year, unfortunately, as much as we wish it would be. But that's kind of what the history of the politics of the Farm Bill have been at. So the Agriculture Committee, it's where this all begins. So on the Senate Ag Committee, we have Pat Roberts, he's from Kansas. He is the the chairman. And then we have Debbie Stabenow, she is from Michigan. Back when the House or the Senate flipped, she used to be the chairwoman of the committee. And one of the important things is we have Kirsten Gillibrand from New York State. We haven't had a New York State senator on the committee in a long time, and we think it's vital to have somebody from New York be on the committee just to be able to represent New York State and the diversity that we have. On the House Ag Committee, Mike Conaway is from Texas, and then Colin Peterson, you'll remember, is from Minnesota, and he is the ranking member. And then from New York, we have Sean Patrick Maloney and John Faso, who kind of represent that Hudson Valley area. Again, good to have representation on the committee. But I think when you look at where the chairmen are from each, we have Kansas and Texas. What do they grow in Kansas and Texas? Not a lot of cabbage, or they grow a lot of corn, soybeans. So I think trying to get our message in is important as well, to say, hey, we need to make sure we're representing all crops. So the way, the Farm Bill kind of works through and kind of becomes into, the form that is, the committees will hold listening sessions across the country. That happened in 2017. They want to hear feedback from people on what worked, what hasn't worked in the programs. One was held up in the Hudson Valley. We were happy to have the House Ag Committee come and listen to our farmers. And then based on that feedback, the committee staff drafts the bill language and releases that. So in spring 2018, the House released their language, and then early summer 2018, the Senate released their language. And those two bills differ greatly in some places on what's included. And so as an organization, we kind of set priorities of what we'd like to see in the Farm Bill. So one of our top things was protect current Farm Bill spending. We've, when we did the last 2014 Farm Bill, the Farm Bill took a $23 billion cut to help with deficit spending. So we said, hey, agriculture and nutrition have done their part. We've cut our programs and we've really slimmed down what our programs entail. So we wanted to make sure we maintain that funding. Maintaining a unified Farm Bill that includes nutrition programs and farm programs. Every time we start to talk about the Farm Bill, some people are like, hey, let's split it. And we're like, no, we want to make sure that we keep those programs together. And some of our top priorities are risk management tools for farmers, crop insurance, and commodity title programs. So as Michael pointed out, working with others in New York to kind of get that message across. We worked with a whole host of organizations to draft a letter that said, these are our positions of supporting nutrition, the conservation programs, as well as farm programs, to really make sure that all of those are really supported going forward. So when we get down into the nitty-gritty of what's included in the Farm Bill, it's broken out typically into 12 different titles that address different sectors of agriculture and food policy. And we'll walk through each commodity title or each title just to give you a broad overview of what's in that program. So the first one, of course, is the commodities program, and this supplies support programs for crops like corn, wheat, soybeans, sugar, as well as dairy. And this was traditionally where we saw a lot of the subsidy programs. In 2014, we saw kind of a movement away from direct subsidies and direct payments. Now, in the past, there would be cases where a farmer would kind of gauge, okay, how much in a payment can I get, and that would predict which crop he would plant, which we think, probably not a great way to, run a program or kind of run a farm. So they've switched to kind of saying you have to show a loss of planting a crop. So, or if your price falls below a specific price that you have to lock in. And of course we saw, when we talk about the crop insurance, we'll talk about kind of what those programs do, but we saw moving to more having farmers pay actual dollars to protect their crops versus just a direct payment. Yes?
Can you just explain that again, because I can't believe what I heard. So can you just explain that one more time? The first part about how you have to produce crops at a law. Can you explain that?
Yep, so let's say, let's take dairy, for instance. If you say, let's say you're, I'm trying to think of how if you're, let's say you traditionally get like $15 for 100 weight of milk, which is how milk is priced, and you receive $13, you could protect that $2 margin and receive a payment for that loss that you experienced. So like corn, if you were guaranteed $8 and you only received $6, you could receive a payment based on that. But you'd have to show a loss that you actually planted the crop and that you experienced the loss based on weather conditions or some type of drought. You just don't get it just because you want it. You have to sign up for the program.
Sorry.
Question?
So who guarantees that price point? Is that set based on precedent? Like what was the past year or?
Yep, so that's set through historical yield data. So if it's traditionally been, you get 200 bushels per acre of corn. If you fall below that, and that's usually based on a county average. So whatever your county is traditionally producing in the past, if you fall below that, that's kind of when things would kick in. And that's typically set through the USDA, through the Farm Service Agency, where farmers report the crops that they have planted, how much they planted, and then how much they were able to get. And they do have to show a loss through documentation. That's okay, I'm like... and then Title II is conservation. And this kind of goes through supporting farmers put conservation program practices on their farm, and that's through the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency. So if a farm wants to plant a cover crop to protect the soil in the winter, they can receive cost share programs money for that. So if it costs you $100 to plant that crop, you may get a payment of like $50 to plant that. And so we think that is beneficial to our farmers just because you don't always get an economic return as much with conservation practices, although we would say you're protecting soil health, it's going to return you in the future with good soil quality and good soil health. So there are some benefits there. We also think protecting water quality and the environment is good as well. On Title III, this does trade, so it kind of helps brand U.S. products in the global market and get those established throughout the globe. It also helps fund some of the foreign aid to other developing countries. And then Title IV is our big nutrition program, and the big one, of course, is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's about $4.7 billion to New York State, about 2.8 million residents. About nationally, I want to say it represents about $68 billion to about 42 million residents. So it does have, implications all across the country, but also in New York as well. It also does the Emergency Food Assistance Program, the Fresh Fruit and Market Purchase Program, the Farmers Market Nutrition Program. It also does the EBT benefits being able to be used at farmers market, which we view as a big, big benefit because, you know, instead of going down to the grocery store and buying whatever is on the shelf, you're able to go to a farmer's market, interact with, you know, a farmer and learn more about it. And I think it, you know, sometimes, not to say, it also creates access to that where people may not have been as comfortable going to a farmer's market. And being able to use that there instead of seeing a farmer's market as out of their reach. There's also the Double Bucks program, which allows people to receive more funding for their SNAP program. Title V is the credit program, and this provides low interest loans to farmers. Also assists the beginning farmers and ranchers in, you know, getting a low interest loan to start a farm. You know, a lot of times you'll go into a regular commercial bank and they're like, we're not going to provide you a loan because farming is so risky. So this provides another avenue to receive that funding. Title VI is rural development, and that supports rural businesses and community programs, broadband, rural water, rural healthcare. In the past, you know, electric companies maybe weren't willing to go that extra mile to install electric. Now it's broadband, and getting sure, you know, if you want to run a good farm business, maybe internet is important to your farm, so getting that out there is important as well. Title VII, the research and extension title. This is where our land grant universities come in, providing research and outreach to farmers, also doing, you know, trials on fields to get, you know, what varieties may work well in New York State and what doesn't work well. Question?
Yeah. Does beginning farmers and ranchers, like what's the definition of a farmer? Is that someone who could be working, you know, in a sort of lab-like growing setting?
Yep, so that's both, you know, rural, urban. Basically what it comes down to is less than 10 years of, you know, having a Schedule F with the IRS. So it's pretty flexible and working with, you know, the Farm Service Agency and USDA to get that funding. We think is important because it does go, it's not just you have to live and have a 100-acre, it's anybody who would be able to show that they're doing a farm operation. Title VIII is forestry, and this provides funding for forestry management, invasive species, also, you know, another key impact not only for the forestry but agriculture in general as well. Title IX is energy, and so that's, you know, rural renewable energy development, including biofuels, doing research there on, you know, what biofuels work, what don't work. Title X is horticulture, and this is something, you know, we pay very close attention to because it does specialty crop funding and organic farming operations as well. So this is programs that help farms transition to organic through the Organic Cross Share company or program. It also supports specialty crops through a block grant. So states receive money to help do marketing on specialty crops, you know, like, you know, snap beans, to kind of enhance their place in the market and kind of get consumers more interested in them. It's also our research and market development. Yes.
So in the Title IX energy, is composting included in that, included biofuel or any kind of, you know?
Not so much. It's more development of ethanol and, you know.
Is composting included in any of these title programs?
Specifically funding for it?
Yeah.
Not significantly, no. There's no direct line for composting of that form. You know, sometimes farmers will do on-farm composting, but it's not a direct line where you could receive assistance for that. Question?
Question on the energy.
Yep.
Does it also kind of focus on dual usage of land, where like farming will have PV solar panels or even water collection from rain?
Not traditionally, no, that's not something that's included. It's pretty much just, biofuels in the term of, producing corn or other cellulosic based products. Question?
You keep saying snap beans.
Yep.
What are those?
So they're basically, because when you snap them, they snap, and
Those like they're string beans.
string beans, yeah.
There's whole beans and there's,
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yes, sorry. Question?
Yeah, I may have, maybe I missed it. Was there anything in there about labor and addressing these problems that we do have with labor issues, training? I see that it went to farmers for helping assisting them start a farm and things like that. But is there any money going to any actual training of labor or sourcing labor or addressing the problem of lack of labor?
No. Traditionally, there's been no labor provisions in the Farm Bill. Not to say that there couldn't be, but this one, 2018 Farm Bill doesn't.
I'm going to tweak that a little bit. So we have funding in partnership with Cornell through the BFRDP grant, Beginning Farmer Research Rancher Development Program. And we are working with Latino farm workers throughout the state to train them specifically to be farm managers and to be farm owners. So, and that ranges from ESL classes to managing seasonal part-time staff. So there are sub-programs within each that is going to specific types of farmer training, but we're tweaking it.
But that's not under the Farm Bill, it's just under...
No, it's under
funding?
funding that's provided through the Farm Bill.
Which title?
Where's BFRDP?
5?
That I don't know. Is it
Beginning farmer.
probably
you have that
either credit or it might be under miscellaneous as well. Yes, the miscellaneous catches all.
Just for questions, well, let's wait till the end so that everybody could hear everybody else's question.
Okay.
So I'll hand them around the mic. We'll have a good 20, 25 minutes.
Yep. And then Title 11, that gets to our crop insurance programs. And this offers insurance programs for which farmers can buy coverage for damages or loss of crops. So, let's say our farmers, had bought crop insurance and they got hit by, Hurricane Florence or then Hurricane Michael that's coming. If they had crop insurance, they could receive a payment. It's kind of like car insurance. If you get hit and there's damages, you get reimbursed. But I think one of why we've kind of moved to the crop insurance base is the farmer actually has to buy into it. It has to expend, money and be, invested in, what they expect their losses to be. And one of the other programs that we saw created in the last Farm Bill was the Whole Farm Revenue Coverage Program. And this provides insurance coverage for specialty crops. So whereas, the traditional crop insurance programs, it's easy to insure a farm that maybe grows 200 acres of corn and then 200 acres of soybeans. If you have a farm that grows 50 varieties of specialty crops from, lettuce to herbs to flowers to cabbage for, a more niche market, it's really hard to write a straight insurance coverage for them. So the whole farm kind of provides that flexibility and is it's still in the pilot phase, which is good because USDA has allowed flexibility under it. But we think it's a good start, and we're looking to see how feedback from our farmers of did it work, did it not work, how can we improve the program going forward. And then Title 12 is kind of the catch-all. It's our miscellaneous assistance to limited resource producers, veteran farmers, beginning farmers, our traditionally underserved farmers, to provide funding for them to low interest loans, get started, and kind of get them interested in those programs as well. So once each house sets their version of the bill. They released it, and then, HR 2, to point out how important we hope the Farm Bill would be, the tax reform bill that was passed earlier this year was HR 1. So we were hoping that HR 2 would kind of up the ante. Didn't do all of that, but we're getting there. And then the Senate just gave it 30-42. So once each of the bills are introduced in their respective committees, amendments are able to happen. Some of our farmers or some of our representatives really want to make changes to the way what a farmer can receive based on their adjusted gross income. So if they if they're paid over $900,000 is the current threshold, if you earn more than that, then you wouldn't be able to receive payments through this program. So there's a lot of back and forth on, what limits should we set at that? Because some, Republicans really carry that torch of we don't want to be doing those direct payments. And then committee passage, and then it's up for consideration by the entire chamber. Look back to your Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law type of thing. That's how that works. So what we do as an organization, and lots of advocacy and lobbying organizations do this as well. If you'd like a copy of our side-by-side, I'm more than happy to send it to you. And what we kind of do is we go through the whole Farm Bill and the things, that are our priorities and things we care about. We set, this is the Senate, this is the House, and then this is the New York Farm Bureau position on it. So we kind of use this as a handout with our congressional members to say, okay, here's the two versions. Here, when in negotiations, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. Hopefully they can adjust, but they're hearing from a multitude of organizations on what those priorities are. So when it comes to passage, in getting it to reconciliation, it takes a little more effort than it has in the past. So some major differences in the program was the conservation programs. The House wants to eliminate a program called the Conservation Stewardship Program and kind of take that option away. That's something we were concerned with. But the big holdup is the House version, where they're looking to do work requirements for able-bodied individuals who are receiving SNAP. As an organization, we didn't take a position on those provisions just because we don't really have a stake in that. All our position on SNAP really is we support getting access to food, especially New York products, by New York consumers as well as consumers in the US and the global market. And the Senate did not make major changes to SNAP. And kind of what that SNAP work requirements did was it created a partisan farm bill. So now you have Republicans and Democrats not willing to work together just because of how partisan that issue became. And you saw that when they first tried to take a vote back in May, the Republicans lost because of how partisan it was. And the other fact that some of the Republicans said, we aren't going to vote for this unless you guarantee us a vote on immigration. So that played into the vote as well. And the leadership said, okay, we'll give you a vote on immigration, which hasn't happened yet, but that's okay. And then in June, we saw a very, very close vote where it was 213 to 211. And then, of course, in the Senate, where they didn't have that, those SNAP requirements, 86 to 11. And those 11 were mostly Republicans who weren't happy with the adjusted gross income requirements. So moving forward, it kind of set this precedent of should we be focusing on the Senate version because it's much more bipartisan and got passed by a majority vote. Of course, the House is like, no, we can't do that. So that's where it's gotten things more complicated. So this is how the House vote went in June. So you'll traditionally, of course, the red is Republican and the blue is Democrat. So 20 Republicans actually broke away and voted with the Democrats, mostly based on the SNAP provisions. And of course, you kind of see, the traditionally where we see the Republican and Democrat, on the coast and in the middle. And this is kind of just gives an overview of how much the House bill cuts down. And there's another slide that'll show the House and the Senate compared. But basically, it cuts funding for the Farm Bill by over $89 billion over 10 years. And so the projected total cost of the House Farm Bill is $867 billion over 10 years. So that's kind of what the expenditure looks like. And then on the Senate vote, much more bipartisan. The yes votes are in the blue. It's not based on party on this one. And then the nays from Oklahoma, that's Chuck Grassley. He is big on the adjusted gross income as well. So both farm bills are budget neutral. You see kind of where they're drawing some of the cuts from. You can kind of see the cuts from the House on nutrition, but also where the Senate is, and then cuts to rural development as well, which we're kind of looking at to say, make sure we're not cutting programs that support farmers, and kind of rural access to, healthcare and, the rural services. So this is the House and Senate Farm Bill compared against the 2014 Farm Bill. As you can see, overall spending kind of dips down and then ramps up a little as we go up to 2028, with in mind that we would get a new Farm Bill somewhere in between that would adjust the projections over the 10 years. So once they pass both houses, then we head to the conference committee, which is where 4 principals, so the chairman and the ranking individual, come together and talk. The 4 come together to talk about the program, and they also get committee conference members from the Senate and the House to meet together to talk and negotiate the Farm Bill. By law, they only actually ever have to meet once to go through negotiations, and they've met once, so now it's kind of the 4 principals, Roberts, Stabenow, Conaway, and Peterson are kind of the big 4 in the room, kind of working through the actual provisions, and continue to see the potential challenges there. The commodity programs, again with the adjusted gross income limits, the Senate wants to go from $900,000 to $700,000, and you'd have to be a farmer that's actively engaged in the farm. Of course, the SNAP provisions, the Senate doesn't make any major changes to SNAP, but of course the House does, and the House, Republicans have really dug in on this one, and it doesn't help when we have a president who also tweets, hey, I want, working provisions, and that just adds fuel to the fire. Conservation programs, again, are another big issue with the Conservation Stewardship Program and EQIP funding, which is the Environmental Qualities Incentive Program, which is a cost share program. And there's also a Conservation Reserve Program, which kind of puts marginal farmland into an easement program for a number of years where a farmer gets rental payments to take that land out of production. And so there's questions about how many acres do we want to reserve under that program and allow to be enrolled in that program. Because sometimes we see is farmers in certain areas, the rental rates they receive through USDA are higher than rental rates they would receive through a neighboring farmer who may want to rent their land. So of course they're going to go with that. It's also something we see as a hardship for beginning farmers. If there's certain land that could be available to a beginning farmer, but it's tied up in an ag easement, that complicates things as well. When we also look at bipartisan support, no Democrats offered amendments to the bill in committee, which means they may want certain things. And so they're probably doing a runaround with, Peterson and Stabenow to say, hey, we want these things, but we didn't get them because we were just automatic no because of the SNAP provisions in the House. And then another fun tidbit, I think, is the hemp legalization. So this has been a major thing for Mitch McConnell. His state of Kentucky has a big industrial hemp pilot research program. It's similar to the program here in New York, but their acreage is very large. They've done a lot of it, and that, you know, we've never seen a majority leader get so involved in the Farm Bill, but he has because of the hemp, which is good that he's putting pressure on it to get it done, but we want to make sure that it's a good Farm Bill. So our deadline to get things done was September 30th. That's when the 2014 Farm Bill expired. So again, they couldn't reach agreement on those things. The crop insurance programs continue as is. They continue to receive funding. Nutrition programs, for the most part, continue to receive funding. There are some programs in there that don't have permanent funding, so they're kind of in this limbo of where, because there's also no federal spending bill and there's been no appropriations for this bill, we're in this land of these programs exist, but there's no funding to support them. Dairy programs as well as commodity programs continue as is until January 1, when we hit like the dairy cliff or the commodity cliff, where they revert back to 1949 law. For some odd reason, that's the year they picked to revert back to. So we continue to, monitor that. And there's also 39 orphan programs impacted, which make about 6% of the Farm Bill. So this is conservation programs, beginning farmer programs, some of the nutrition programs, where they still exist, but there's no appropriated funds for them. So farmers could still sign up for the program, they just wouldn't get a contract to be enrolled in a conservation program, or a beginning farmer wouldn't have access to those support programs. Another big one is the organic cost share program. So if a farmer is looking to transition to becoming organic, that program is still there, but no funding that goes through it at this time until it's re-upped. So crystal ball predictions. So we're in this limbo area. And currently congressional members are out campaigning and not really focusing on what's happening in Washington. They're out looking to get reelected. So when Congress comes back at the end of November and in December, they could pass it during the lame duck session. However, if the House or the Senate switches to the Democrats, that may push the Farm Bill further, because you want to write a bill that's favorable to you. So if the Senate stays a Republican and the House switches to Democrats, we may see more meshing there, because if we have tight majorities or tight margins of what's needed for a vote, that's when people, are more likely, I feel, to negotiate. So maybe that will happen, but if both switch to the Dems, we may want to see them write their own bill, which would probably exclude the SNAP provisions. Or we could pass a year-long extension of the Farm Bill, or the last 2014 Farm Bill, I believe, was supposed to be the 2012 Farm Bill. So they extended the program out several years while they worked on the negotiations. We were really hopeful that we'd get it done by September 30th, but I think an on-time Farm Bill has happened maybe one or two times in the history of the Farm Bills, and we've had 17 Farm Bills, so this is to be expected. So some of the impacts of the Farm Bill on the food system, and we kind of saw this in the food fight video clips, as well as Michael talked about it as well. It does provide support to farmers, which, we have a stable low-cost food system and a food supply. We spend a lot less than other developed countries, but that leads to both pro and cons. There's a lot of cheap food out there, and should we be spending our food dollars where we are? Should we be, purchasing more nutritional products, and how do we really develop those, more specialty crops? And it's also good for research and product development of getting those products out there. Questions?
I'll come join you.
Okay, that's right, we're doing it up here.
We have about 10 minutes left. if folks have questions, and then if people want to stay and linger, and we can continue to have conversations and ask questions. Siobhan.
Do you have a question? So with all of this, after that, if I missed it, I'm sorry. Michael's asking us to open our minds to like, who should control food policy? Who, in your opinion, does currently control food policy if we can't, like, if we have all these pushes on what's happening?
Yeah, and I would say there's probably, from my perspective, no single individual that really controls food policy. I think, farmers do in a sense in the way, they're able to message through organizations like Farm Bureau, but other organizations as well, with representatives on what they need. I would also say, corporations have a part in it as well of what, they're looking for a bottom line as well. Agree with it, disagree with it. I think, they're out to make a profit as well. But I think every individual also has a role to play in food policy as well. Are you talking to your congressional members? Are you talking to the organizations you belong to really influence that policy?
Hi, so on the side where you're talking about the dairy cliff and the 1949 law, what is the dairy cliff and what is that law?
Yeah, so basically the dairy cliff, so we revert back to the 1949 law, and it kind of affects the way milk is priced. So it would impact the way, some say it would make milk prices go up because our pricing system was a lot different back then. But I think the actual potential of that happening is probably pretty low, just because people are like, that would just create chaos in the system, because 1949 was a long time ago and our pricing is a bit different. That's okay. I'm like, I won't go into dairy pricing because it's a very complicated system that, but basically it would revert back and affect the way milk is priced.
I had a question about the insurance portion in one of the titles, because I know insurance for a car here in New York is relatively expensive. So what would be the insurance prices for a farm, or like what percentage of whatever they make? And is it actually affordable to get insurance if something terrible did happen, like a hurricane or a drought or anything like that?
Yeah, and some of the insurance programs are subsidized by the federal government, so they are economical for farmers to participate in. And your insurance rate, it's kind of like your car insurance. You kind of pick the coverage you want. Do you want collision? Do you want catastrophic or not? So people are able to pick the level to cover. Do they want to cover all their crops? Do they want to cover 50% of their crops? So there's lots of options. And I want to say 85% of like commodities in the U.S. were covered by crop insurance last year.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is about the role, you touched on this a little bit, but the role of lobbying in this whole system, and how it realistically works, and how that influences policy.
Yeah. And I think, for better or for worse, sometimes lobbyists get a bad rap, which, sometimes, an organization like us, we are going to meet with our congressional members and talking to them about the policies we represent. Some lobbying organizations do have a PAC, or political action committee, where they are donating to campaigns to influence, not influence, but support a certain member of a party. We are a nonpartisan organization, so we don't donate to a specific party. We do have a state PAC where we'll donate to certain state representatives. But I think, every organization and every business does it a little bit different. Some just purely rely on meeting with congressional members and their representation or their reputation. Others will go in and, make those donation contributions. Does that?
And then how does that influence?
Oh. I think it depends on the member of Congress and what they're willing to be influenced by, you know. If they're tied to their constituents, they're going to listen to what their constituent wants and not, you know, who may have donated to their campaign. But I think, you know, that's okay, and I'm like, save me here.
It goes all ways, right? So it's hard, it's very expensive to get reelected. And so a lot of politicians, their job is to raise money to get reelected, and they are influenced by who's writing them checks. I will tell you that this is not in terms of influencing policy and lobbying. There is a nonprofit lobbying arm. Debbie Stabenow is from the state of Michigan. There are food and farm policy-based organizations in the state of Michigan that disproportionately benefit from the Finney program. So it's not limited to just big ag, it's not limited to who pays the top dollar. There is ways to influence throughout. Unfortunately, so much of policy is made by that influence, which is why coalition building is so important if we're going to influence. Because you actually can influence some of the policies through coalition building. The National Sustainable Ag Coalition, what we did together writing the letter, actually there's a provision in the House bill that's much better than the Senate bill related to the Community Food Project program. So there are some programs that benefit nonprofits, and there are others that actually benefit individuals and farmers. And so through this coalition, we advocated for a provision to go back in, which was the CFP funding, rather than support some of the Finney programming, which was the Double Up program. So there are ways to influence, but obviously big money has disproportionate amount of influence on policy.
Yeah, so two quick questions. The first one is, could you be so kind as to share the slides? Because it was so chock full of information. I really was paying attention to you, not taking notes. And then two is, do you have any suggestions or any thoughts or comments or how things can be different for food and influenced differently? For example, I recently read that the planning associations are adding food policy to their lists of things to have groups and meetings on. I thought that to be interesting, and since you have great experience in this area, I was wondering, there's something special, and I apologize, I have really bad allergies.
Which question do you want to answer first? We're going to spend the next, I guess, 10 weeks or 8 weeks together having these conversations of how we can influence and what policies are out there and where, like I said, where we can disrupt. I find this issue, and the more I learn about it, to be incredibly overwhelming. And that there are big forces at play that influence day-to-day policy. And that it is in many ways going to be partly from the ground up that we make changes. I heard Raj Patel speak recently, and whoever doesn't know Raj, one of the recommended readings or suggested readings for this class is Raj, and he was speaking. There needs to be a reckoning globally in this country if there is going to be a shift. And a lot of us are going to have to ask very uncomfortable conversations and challenge and then see a major shift, and we'll talk about that throughout the course. There is no one actually easy answer to give. There's no great hopeful answer to give. A lot of hard work is going to go into play, and a lot of people in this country are working hard to see that day of reckoning happen.
Yeah, and I would say there's able to influence at all levels, but I think more so at the local level. You know, we've seen counties that are losing farms in New York State. They get together and say, hey, it's a priority for us to impact, to preserve farms or preserve the agricultural aspect of our community. So whether that's through preserving a farm to make sure that it exists in perpetuity, or to say, how can we as a community better support our agricultural operations. So I think starting at the community level is a start, but also getting involved at the federal and state level is important as well.
What's that? It's 7:30 now, so whoever wants to leave, feel free to leave. Reminder, there's no class next week. We're meeting again in 2 weeks. Thank you all for coming. And Ray, if you want to ask a question, I'll repeat your question.
Thank you. So why don't we wait 1 minute and then come up?
I'll repeat your question. Okay. If folks want to move up, make it easier, it's up to you. And I guess we'll spend like 10 more minutes, all right? Okay, Rain.
Thank you for that. It's good that I have the microphone because I need to sort of talk this out a bit. So there was the news of Novadia, Novadia, right? The organization that provided the EBT machines to farmers markets. The reason I thought about that was because of the non-involvement in SNAP, and I thought about how much income loss it would be to farmers. And I know that didn't happen through SNAP, but a lot of people purchase farm products, produce with SNAP. So I was curious about that, and if that conversation came up at all, any advocacy around that came up. And another thing, I looked at the list of the organizations, and if I missed any, I'm sorry, but I didn't really see any that represented specifically urban farmers or farmers of color. So I was wondering if you could speak to that as well.
So on the SNAP EBT issue, that was a concern for us because we do have a lot of farmers who go to farmers markets who have customers who utilize the EBT. So I think it was good that New York State came out pretty heavy on that. Governor Cuomo said, hey, we're gonna work with the Farmers Market Federation to kind of contract with De Novo to make sure that those benefits stay in place. We worked on a letter to USDA to say, hey, we need to figure this contracting thing out so we don't have a disruption in service. And we also messaged to our congressional members, hey, make sure you're looking at this as well to make sure that we have good contracts going in place. I think USDA is still working out the logistics of continuing that, so thank goodness we have a carryover right now to kind of continue that. And to your point about urban, yeah.
Before you go to that, I'm going to chime in on this. So does everyone know what Ray asked about, that on July 1st, Novadia is a company that about 1,700 individual farmers markets across the country and then a host of other farmers used their platform to process wireless SNAP transactions, whether at farmers markets or on farmer in other places. And on July 1st, they announced that they were going out of business within 30 days because the USDA had given their contract over to a different operator. And
They didn't have the ability to accept EBT.
no, it wouldn't have been able to use that. So we're one of those organizations that use the Novadia platform, and 30 days after that point, we would have no longer been able to use all of our equipment to do that, along with all these other programs around the country. There are other programs that use the old terminals, but the Novadia was the first one and the only one in the country that you could process SNAP using like an app-based platform, and these were, for years, this was the program pushed by the USDA So free equipment was provided to organizers of farmers markets, many of whom are volunteer-led organizations, or to individual farmers. And this was the technology, would also be forward-thinking, and also allowed you to process credit cards and debit cards. So you could process all three in using a single application. When that happened, Governor Cuomo stepped in. Actually, the first thing that happened was the National Association of Farmers Market Nutrition Programs bailed them out for the first month, so it got us through the end of August. And then Governor Cuomo stepped in, and New York State paid, again, this is for the benefit of the nation, so for this to go through February. So there is a lot of behind-the-scenes organizing that's happening right now. And the questions that we are asking are, who has the capacity, what technology is out there? What organization has the capacity? Because this is a tech company. It's basically a tech company. You're going to have in-house developers. This is the next generation technology, so that when WIC becomes e-WIC and the Farmers Market Nutrition Program becomes wireless, who's going to have the capacity to process these? The health bucks, the double up bucks, and then what's the technology going to be in 10 years when you can do phone to phone? So what we are asking as a community is, who has the capacity to do that? Where's the funding going to come from? Who's the USDA going to contract out with? And then what's the role of the larger community in playing a role in guiding decision-making going forward? I'll turn it back over to you for part two.
Yeah. So I will say traditionally we haven't partnered as much with urban, based farming organizations or organizations for minorities as well. That's probably an area we need to focus more on as it becomes a bigger sector of where people may be getting their food or have a local connection to agriculture. So I think that is an opportunity there. We try and engage with a lot of the urban food programs as well, but I think reaching out to those who are supplying the urban food is good as well. So we're always welcome to interact with those groups as well, and would welcome opportunities to do that.
So in the meeting where I met Lauren, Keon Mickey was there, Cheryl Durant were there, but like you say, it's few and far between, and that's the landscape that needs. That's the reckoning that needs to follow.
Hi. This is a question related to lobbyists. So I know there's a commodity future trading situation. I definitely don't know a lot about it around farming, and I'm wondering the role of future traders in lobbying efforts.
And I don't have a good answer for that. We did, in full disclosure, our national organization, American Farm Bureau, worked with our insurance company to develop it's called a dairy revenue protection program, and basically what it does, it allows you to kind of forward contract some of your milk prices at a particular margin. So that's kind of where we lend ourselves, to some of the future contracting, but overall, I can't say, how much, lobbying is contributing to general future contracting.
Did you have a question?
Oh,
Sorry.
just on 2 questions ago, the beginning farmer and rancher development program, like they have a beginning farmer training program, and like one of the questions and one of the considerations is like under-resourced farmers in that, and I think that's the only farm bill funding that goes directly toward training or assisting.
There's one other provision.
There's one other?
There's one other provision.
Okay. Cool.
And I'll answer it to you for the next class. It's like 25. It's like 2504 funding.
Hi, specifically Lauren, you mentioned how farmers do play obviously an important role in creating legislation. I was curious about the actual methods and frequency of communication with farmers. Like, what format does that take?
when are they entering rooms? Is this through a survey? And just given like the historical nature of farmer participation, what ideas and possibilities for more involvement might there be?
So as an organization, you know, our communication with farmers about what's happening at the state and federal level probably is happening on a weekly, bi-weekly basis where we're asking them. We set up, it's called e-lobbying, where a farmer can go in and send a letter right to their congressional member through electronic methods. You know, we always encourage them to also engage, you know, over the phone or in district meetings when the congressional member is back in the district. We take farmers down to DC probably about 2 to 3 times a year to meet with their congressional members in person. We think, you know, that's valuable for our farmers to see what the environment is like in DC, but it also shows to the congressional member that we're willing to come and meet them on their home territory as well. So I think it all depends on what's happening, but you know, we're engaging them at least, you know, weekly or bi-weekly through more electronic methods at this point is an easier way for us to get them to take action, and it's quick and easy. You know, if they're in the tractor and they have their smartphone, all they have to do is type in their name and they can send a message to their congressional member.
We do letter writing campaigns with our farmers on the federal level and on the state level. We also set up like on-farm meetings for congressional staff. We've yet to do it with federal senate, our senators on the federal level, but also on-farm meetings with our state senators and assembly people, and then bring those folks to market. And then the same thing with city council members. We're gonna have 2 more questions.
So I'm wondering why WIC is not included on the Farm Bill and why that is a state program, and if there's a benefit to it being state and not federal.
And I'll be honest, we don't touch too much on WIC, other than, you know, it exists at the federal level and it gets appropriated typically each year, but as Michael said, it can be a struggle to get it reappropriated. And I think it might come down to who's the controlling party and whether or not they see that as another quote unquote, you know, subsidy or a handout for individuals, which is unfortunate because, you know, we want individuals, you know, and children to get off to a good start. So to not have that consistency or knowing that every year or every 5 years that program exists, I think can be challenging.
I don't know the WIC program funding mechanism itself. I know the WIC FMMP. There is no benefit to the way that it's currently set up, particularly because all states are not created equally. And so there are states that in the country that don't participate at least in the farmers market nutrition program side, because they have to put in the state match. New York State is actually a leader in that. But I don't know about the larger WIC program and funding, and we'll look it up. Or you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you can give a bit of insight into this, but when you rolled up onto the screen that massive amount of debt that is existent right now when it comes to farms, it makes me a little upset that Sally Mae contacts me so much for my student loans looking at that number. She has some bigger problems. But when it comes to things like what's happening right now with tariffs internationally, when it comes to our food production, and like you were saying, our whole entire kind of global reach, I know that the United States, based on its land allocation, has the most farmable land percentage out of any other country. So with the massive amount of debt like that, is it possible that the farm industry could essentially have a crash the same way that the housing industry did? And what exactly would that mean for farmers on the larger scale compared to like smaller scale farmers in the state?
So I would tell you it's already happened. And we're going to look at this a little bit next week, but really dive down week 3, and you'll see it in your readings. We've lost 98% of our chicken farmers in this country, and there's never been more chicken produced in the history of the world, right? We have lost more. So you'll see this stat again. 88% of our farms are small family farms. They count for 5% of the net income. All right? 82% of farms require off-farm income. 38% of primary farmers are working. So 38% of the primary farmer on a farm has a primary job that is not agriculture. So it's already happening. Right? And one of the stats you saw is that there's been a 50% decline in net profit over the last 5 years in agriculture. And that's before the tariffs went into place, before we cut off NAFTA, so before our pork producers lost their markets in Mexico, and so I would tell you that it's already happened.
Yeah, and I think, a good example of past history is, the farm crisis that happened in the 80s. We saw a lot of farms go out of business, and I think, as we continue to see, debt farm increase, and I know Michael's going to talk about this through like the chicken and the poultry industry, we've seen a lot of vertical integration, where, with the pork industry, we see Smithfield, where they own the animals and the farmer just kind of, owns the land, and that's really all they do. They get the food for the animals imported in, and they that exists as the mechanism and ownership of the business. So I think that's
And those farmers, again, we're actually going to talk about this, but those farmers are considered independent contractors, yet everything is controlled by the corporation. So they don't get health insurance, they don't get retirement packages, right? They don't get salaries, but yet everything is controlled by who's providing them the feed, who's providing them the inputs, and who's doing the distribution, the packaging, the marketing, everything else. So these are the conversations we're going to have throughout the course. So whoever's left, I want to thank Lauren. Because I'll thank them. I started looking at the farm bill, and I was like, I can't even begin to approach this. So really, thank you for coming down from Albany today. She came down from Albany, she's going back tonight. Thank you guys, we're going to have a great 5 more weeks. Have a great night.
Thank you.